tonight, isn't it, in this cold evening? I have some questions here from the audience, so let you decide which one's going to answer. The first one, what do you intend to do about homeless people on the streets?
Well, one thing I have noticed is that there does seem to be a fair number of people who are homeless on the streets in Hanley and indeed in Stoke itself. What has to happen is we need to build more homes. That is the bottom line. You know, at the moment, there is around a 3,000 waiting list in this area for people to get a council house. And the problem that we have is that a council house hasn't been built in this area for nigh on 30 years. It's not good enough. There needs to be a council house building programme. And the problem began in many ways under the Thatcher government with the right to buy. The right to buy is great, fantastic. But when people bought their houses, that money should have been reinvested to build. The idea is quite simply, we need to build more houses and we need to get the homeless off the streets as soon as possible.
Next question. Given that 2/3 of constituents voted to leave the EU, how would you seek to represent their views in Parliament?
Well, he's going to speak up for them, isn't he? Quite simple, really, isn't it? He's going to argue for Brexit. And there's no such thing, folks, as hard Brexit or soft Brexit. These are all media terms that have been designed and picked up by politicians who want to delay and dilute the Brexit process. Paul isn't going to back hard Brexit or soft Brexit. He's going to back democratic Brexit. He's going to try and make sure you get what you voted for, and the Labour candidate will do the very opposite. So it's up to the 70% who voted for Brexit and helped us to win that war to make sure we win the peace. And I believe that you are going to do it.
What do you think about the House of Lords?
Well, I did have an idea. My idea was to get him a peerage and then abolish it. Seriously, all I will say about the House of Lords is this. If the House of Lords try to meddle or mess or slow down Brexit, they will be signing their own death warrants.
It's amazing speculation about what I'm going to be doing next. 1 week I'm going on Strictly, the next week I'm going into the jungle, and then the next week I'm going to the House of Lords. But I think that Groucho Marx was right. I wouldn't want to join a club that would have me as a member.
What will you do to reverse the decline and depression that has affected Stoke after years of Labour neglect to complacency?
Well, Stoke needs far more investment. That is key. And, you know, let me throw this figure out at you. In London, at the moment, they're getting around £5,000 per head spent on infrastructure. In the West Midlands, it's under £500. Everything is being sucked into London. All of the money, all of the big infrastructure projects are occurring, maybe not just in London, but for the benefit of London. Take HS2, for example. HS2, which by the way is bypassing Stoke altogether, is being built for the benefit of one place and one place only. It's London. It will suck even more money and more business into London, and it will leave places like Stoke-on-Trent wears off. But it needs a big house building programme. I'll give you another idea that I've got, actually, which I'll float tonight. Stoke needs an arena. It needs an arena. Liverpool has an arena, has the Echo Arena. Manchester has the MEN. Nottingham has just got an arena, which is a city of a single size. Why can't Stoke have an arena which will bring masses of business into the local area? So the answer to your question, Jill, is Stoke needs a bit of TLC and it needs major investment.
Well, I mean, my big worry about, is really twofold about the armed forces. Firstly, and Paul talked about the veterans issues, but I mean, it's an extraordinary thing. I think very, very few Conservative voters could believe that in the period of David Cameron's premiership, that we saw a Conservative premier who massively increased the foreign aid budget at the time he slashed spending on our armed forces to way below the minimum level that we need of 2% per annum. And, you know, frankly, you go to places like Portsmouth now, and there are more museum vessels than there are active Royal Naval ships. It is absolutely shaming what has been done to British forces. Now, I think one of the reasons we were doing this is because what the big bosses wanted was increased cooperation with our European partners. So, for example, the deal was that if we got into a major conflict overseas, the French would lend us their aircraft carriers. I certainly can't see that happening if there was conflict in the South Atlantic, but I feel we were using European cooperation as a means of cutting and cutting and cutting. So I think actually, to the questioner, that Brexit offers an opportunity for our armed forces, and I think Brexit offers the opportunity to put us right back in a major position in NATO. Trump is not saying that he will jettison NATO. What Trump is saying is that he's not prepared to pick up the tab if other European countries aren't prepared to pay the membership fee. And I think the role of Theresa May is to be the bridge between Trump, the rest of the NATO members, to say, wake up and smell the coffee. A European army is never going to work. It's just an excuse for downsizing armies and for reducing spending, and not to spend 2% per annum on your armed forces and your defence is rather like getting rid of the insurance on your house in case of a fire. It is madness, and I hope Theresa May reverses Cameron's expenditure on our armed forces and takes us back to the top table of world affairs.
I will add to that. I mean, I remember watching the, I'm sure many people here will, I remember watching the debate that Nigel had with Nick Clegg in the 2014 European election campaign. And Nigel said, look, you know, we're heading towards an EU army here, and Nick Clegg called him a dangerous fantasist. I mean,
It's one of the nicest things Clegg's ever said.
And then only a year later, we're on the floor of the European Parliament and we're listening to Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Commission, talk openly about his ambition for an EU army. The great thing about Brexit and the armed forces, it means that Britain will never be part of an EU army.
This question says to both of you, what do you feel for the protesters getting wet outside?
Well, political protest, you know, has a long and healthy tradition in this country. But let me tell you a funny thing. I've been involved in UKIP from the very start. I was one of the founding 12 members of this party. 24 years ago. And I was young and I had prospects, you know, there they are. And we used to protest. We used to to go to the Tory conference, the Labour conference, and we would stand outside giving out leaflets, and perhaps once or twice I might have picked up a loud hailer and said something. What is interesting is that we saw that leaflet that I picked up earlier. Isn't it amazing that when we were on the River Thames in the run-up to Brexit, with the fishing flotilla that had come down from all over the country, Bob Geldof and his multi-millionaire friends were protesting against us. That what we saw in the European Parliament last week was the Labour Party protesting against us. The establishment now protests against UKIP, and that's because we're winning.
I absolutely have no sympathy with those protesters whatsoever. This is the ugly face of Corbyn's Labour Party. And it really is. I've seen something which happens out there tonight. One of our members who's in here is an Orthodox Jew. And as he's walking in, one of the protesters shouts at him, "Go home." Go home. Go home where? Back to Manchester? Where he's from? I mean, this is the face, the nasty face of the hard left in Britain. So if they've got wet, I have absolutely no sympathy whatsoever.
That incident that occurred out there tonight gets reported properly in the press. Can you imagine if one UKIP member had said something disobliging to a Muslim or anybody from any other part of the world? People like Paul and I would be painted out to be complete and utter monsters. Well, I'm afraid some of the people that support Jeremy Corbyn, are monsters, and they need to be exposed.
Paul, this is for you. Although I respect your personal opinion and thoughts on the NHS being an outdated service, what is UKIP's official stance under your leadership?
Well, hang on. I mean, I don't believe it's an outdated service. That refers back to the comment I made back in 2011 when I was talking, and I wrote a letter actually to the Telegraph, and I was saying that the NHS should have more competition, particularly in the area of procurement, whereby the NHS is paying 30 times over the odds for certain drugs. I want to make it perfectly clear. Under my leadership, UKIP is committed to keeping the NHS public and free at the point of delivery. We will put more money into the NHS, as I said, £3 billion every single year, £1.2 billion into social care, and we will pay for it by slashing the bloated, disgraceful foreign aid.
I do it on a radio show some evenings, one or two of you might have heard it. And my question tonight was that given that health tourism is back as a subject being discussed, and remembering that in 2015, when I said in the general election that I thought the £2 billion a year that health tourism was costing the NHS was a disgrace, and I was treated as a political pariah for daring to say, I was condemned by Miliband, Cameron, that woman from north of the border. She's a charmer, and I was condemned by everybody. But as with so many things, and one of the reasons it's important to get a UKIP MP for Stoke, what we do as a party is we go in ahead of everybody else and we say things that ordinary people are thinking and understanding, and we get condemned for it, and then it becomes mainstream thinking in this country. I've just had an hour on LBC, and I couldn't get a caller to ring up and tell me that it wasn't time to end health tourism.
And by the way, I refuse to be lectured or hectored to the NHS. By the way, this is the party of PFI, which has saddled the NHS with an £80 billion debt. It is the party of MRSA, it is the party of mid-staffs. I will not be lectured to on the NHS by a Labour party. In fact, Nigel Farage would turn in his grave if he could see this.
I have three final questions, guys. This one, which I think is very important. Funny enough, our casework that we've had coming into your office has been about to save the people in this community. And I want to know, what will you do to help to save the people in Stoke?
UKIP is committed to scrapping the bedroom tax. But we're also committed to doing away with these ATOS-style assessments, which are nonsense, particularly if you've got a degenerative disease, whereby you're never going to get better, you're only ever going to get worse. What we will do is we will listen to people and we will deal with issues on a case-by-case basis. For those of you in this constituency, you all have my leaflets, you all got my number, you all know where the UKIP shop is. Drop in, I'm always there and I'm always ready to listen.
How does UKIP intend to stop the liberal media from spreading fake news and lies?
Well, yes, I have to say, to be fair, that in the referendum, the BBC coverage was pretty good. Since the referendum, they've reverted to type. And all they ever tell you is how depressed the country is about Brexit. Mind you, that wretched Archbishop does that too, but that's another issue. I have to say this to you. I think that the traditional liberal media are losing their influence, are losing their grasp, and are losing their sheer number of listeners and viewers as every single day goes by. And whilst it may sometimes foster some bad things, what I'm seeing is the phenomenal growth in social media. It means that people can access facts and get them quickly. And I do not believe that we could have won the referendum without the use of social media, because it goes round the back of the traditional liberal establishment. And when Paul gets elected, there'll be all sorts of horrendous things said and written about him by many of our mainstream national newspapers. And do you know what, Paul? It doesn't matter anymore, because people get their news.
It's all right, Sorry.
Watch out for dodgy postal votes.
Yes. Well, on the postal vote issue, watch out for dodgy postal votes, okay? I will say this, UKIP, as a party, is committed to repealing parts of the Representation of People Act 2000, whereby you can have postal votes on demand. Let's go back to the old system, whereby you need to have good reason, you need to be elderly, infirm, disabled, work on the rigs, be in the armed forces, but we shouldn't have postal votes on demand, which allow certain political parties in this country to make elections.
Last question. As the Israeli Prime Minister is visiting the UK today, what positive message does UKIP have for our relationship with the only democracy in the Middle East?
We welcome dealing with democracies. I have to say, I'm personally, I find there's some sort of huge hypocrisy that is going on here in terms of our attitude towards certain Middle Eastern countries and our attitude towards others. And I'll ask this slightly obliquely, Julie, if I can. One of the main stories leading the news tonight is that the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, has said today in the House of Commons that he does not think that President Trump should be invited to speak in the Palace of Westminster, because the Palace of Westminster does not support sexism or racism or extremism of any kind. And yet, this is the same John Bercow, I'm using him as an example of the establishment, this is the same John Bercow who welcomed the Emir of Kuwait into the Palace of Westminster, a country that, amongst other things, bans Israeli Jews totally from visiting their country. Bercow's a hypocrite. Our political system are full of hypocrites, and we should be a bit more careful, in my opinion, about who some of our friends in the Middle East are. I cannot believe the way we continue to crawl to Saudi Arabia when no country has done more to spread Islamic terrorism around the world.
Saudi Arabia. In my opinion, Saudi Arabia, a country which prevents women from driving, which beheaded someone last year for witchcraft, which spreads Islamic fundamentalism all over the globe, is a rogue state. And it's interesting, isn't it, that over a million people now have signed a petition suggesting that Donald Trump not be given a state visit. Yet we allowed the King of Saudi Arabia to come here only a few years ago. And I can't believe that we as a country sold more arms to Saudi Arabia last year than we did to anybody else. It is. It's dirty money, it's wrong, and we should call Saudi Arabia out for everything that it's done wrong in the past 2 decades.
I want to say this as my closing comment, and it's this. We talked about the liberal media, about hypocrisy, and many things. The greatest threat that the Western world faces, and the evil that we face today, is the threat from fundamental Islamic terrorism. Pleased we voted Brexit. I'm pleased we're not part of Schengen. I look at countries like France and Belgium, and frankly, I shake my head, because we all know there are many further outrages to come there. But we've had a political class, and in particular a Labour Party, who effectively have opened our doors to bad people, unvetted, coming into this country. And somebody needs the guts and the courage to stand up for our people, our culture, our tolerant way of life. And I can't think of anybody better than Paul Nuttall as your MP to do that.
I'm going to finish by saying this. There's a great feeling on the ground in this city. Our returns are looking very promising indeed. People are flocking to us. People want us. People need us. People are crying out for change in Stoke-on-Trent Central. They're also crying out for a national voice, someone who can stand up in the House of Commons and can shout out loud on their behalf, and who will get things done. So if you are a voter in this constituency and you want that real change and you want that national voice, don't go out and vote for more lobby fodder. Don't go out and vote for another Labour voice in the wilderness. Go out, vote UKIP, make that change, make this place